episode number 92, Mastering Modern Selling, and we are improving today. Um, Jon, welcome. Jon Selig, welcome as our guest. We expect to have Brandon and Carson show up here at some point, but Brandon is stuck somewhere with no internet. And Carson, I don't know where he's stuck, but I bet you he will show up here at some point. Meanwhile, we are going to improv and talk a little bit today about how do you use humor and or how do you use humor and even jokes in your messaging and your sales strategy. So again, welcome, Jon.
It's good to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Good.
So let's start off a little bit here and tell everybody a little bit about who you are and your background. And then I know there's a lot of interesting questions that we're going to want to cover, just related to using humor and everything in sales, but love to know a little bit more about your background.
Sure. So good to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm Jon Selig. I'm half sales guy, half stand-up comedian, and all parental disappointment. And about 7 years ago, I decided, well, sales and stand-up have all these similar characteristics and parallels. And I merged the two to create comedy writing for revenue teams. And I deliver sales enablement, storytelling, and memorable messaging to revenue teams all through the process of crafting jokes. And ironically, that isn't one. So I do a lot of team building trainings and workshops where go-to-market professionals work together to unpack points that they really want to highlight and shine a light on to their target personas. So typically we choose problems that a vendor can solve for their target persona. And we unpack, well, what can happen if they don't solve this problem? What's that cost of inaction? We get very specific. We get in the reads. We talk about how they affect different stakeholders and different emotions. And then we kind of go down this creative process once we've mapped out all that good knowledge. And I show people, how can you get creative and convert that knowledge into a short, quick bit of ice-breaking humor that makes you relevant, that makes you memorable, and that provokes a conversation with prospects. And I also sometimes just write jokes for my clients. So that's the other side of what I do.
And you're going to give us some examples, right, of what you mean by jokes and how they're used and all of that. But before we do that, you obviously work with a lot of different companies of all sizes. We talk a lot about this on the show. What do you think is the problem today? Like, what is the challenge that sales and marketing organizations are running into related with messaging, and why should they even consider doing some of the things that you get involved with?
I think they're their own worst enemies. They get in their way a lot. They're very scared to take any kind of risk, not just because I think sometimes they're scared that someone above them might not approve of it. I think they think their prospects are too serious. I think they like to play it safe and do what everyone else is doing. And we all know that fortune favors the bold. And when I say jokes, I don't mean like, calling up a prospect and saying, hey, a rabbi, a priest, and a minister walk into a bar and say offensive things to each other. I'm just talking about short, quick, ice-breaking humor that sometimes compares two different things or just paints a bit of a picture about what can go wrong if you don't solve a problem. And our party is rounding out.
I told you the party's going to get bigger and better as we go along.
See, I've learned at an early age that you never want to be on time or early for the party. You got to stroll in so you can make an entrance. And I just so happen to have come off of a really great and impactful meeting with a customer executive that I set up through outreach via LinkedIn and Sales Navigator, and AI helped me write the message. So there's all the stuff we talk about on the show. So I have a good reason why I'm tardy.
There you go. Well, you're practicing what we're preaching is what you're telling us, huh?
That's exactly right. I'm mostly here for Jon. So
okay.
Excited about the show today.
Well, we're just telling some jokes and doing some humor. So it's all good.
Beautiful. Does Jon know any dad jokes? We've been known to tell a few of those on the show before.
Yeah, I don't know. We asked Murray about that.
Just my own father's, but I'm going to make sure, Carson, that we walk away from today going, we don't need AI to craft a good joke.
There you go. That's true. Yes, that is very true. That's one thing that it'll never be able to do as well as humans.
Definitely not.
So Carson, to fill you in real quick, and Jon, have you two met, Carson and Jon?
No, we've exchanged messages but never met.
So everyone's getting this in real time. And by the way, welcome Bob and Chris and Margaret. And looks like you got a lot of fans also out there lining up Jon as well. So the pressure is going to be on for some good humor here. But what we were talking about, Carson, before you got here is, why is it even important to start thinking about how we're messaging and incorporating humor into our messaging? Why does the same old bland sort of stereotypical sales message not working, not making sense? And I was going to, Jon, just ask a follow-up question to what you were saying. Do you think that, and you said, one of the reasons people don't change, right, is they don't want to be offensive. And see, this party just is getting bigger and bigger by the minute.
We're all here.
I know. I told everybody
Jon,
that we would be.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I was late too. So
Brandon, you in Chick-fil-A?
No, I'm at a Fairfield Inn now. I couldn't find good. I mean, I'm like an hour outside of Atlanta, but I've got a meeting immediately after a show, and I thought, oh, no problem. But I couldn't stream from my phone. I couldn't find good Wi-Fi. Here's my secret when I travel: if you have to go to the restroom or you need good Wi-Fi, go to a hotel.
This could be the topic of your next. This could be the topic of your next live stream.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, so anyway, before Jon, just wanted to finish the question here, and then we can kind of get into some of the things. But do you think that the dry, sort of stereotypical, politically correct messaging that tends to exist in sales and marketing, do you think anybody hears it? Do you think the prospect hears it? Or is it just like blah, 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 blah? And is it really, impinging and making an impact?
I don't think political correctness has anything to, quite frankly, do with it. I think everyone's just trying to sound the same. I think creativity and oral and written communication skills are dropping like mad. Like as people lean on emojis and memes to communicate and just images and GIFs, I think this art of like how do we write, how do we speak, how do we communicate is going away a little bit. And I think people need to flex that muscle just the same way, or exercise that muscle the same way as going to the gym. Like when I started stand up in 2011, I sort of stunk at it like everyone tends to when they start. But you go up 3, 4, 5 times a week and you feel yourself growing and developing with how you communicate with a live audience and how you get to the punchline faster. What's funnier? I mean, if sales teams and marketing teams could practice not getting up in front of their peers and delivering jokes, but just basic writing and communicating with one another on a more regular basis, I think that would translate to better outreach, to better demos, to better sales presentations, to better communication skills with their prospects.
Perfect.
I had a conversation this morning. I know I'm late to the dance, and sorry everybody, and sorry to the audience, but we were just having that conversation with someone today about just the amount of automation and the amount of scripting and how dumb it's made people. Like it's like we have this whole generation, and forgive me for anyone I offend, but we have this generation that if you've been in sales or really in almost anything in business since about 2010, if you started in that time, most of what you've been taught is trying to turn you into a robot and not turn you into a thinker. And so things like you're talking about, Jon, your ability to communicate, your ability to have improv, the ability to have a conversation and connect, like that's just all gone down. And I hate to sound like the old guy that's like back in our day, but I find that one to be really, really true.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like half my LinkedIn feed is buy my set of templates that are guaranteed to work. I've spoken with lots of SDR leadership who the SDRs don't write their own messaging. There's one person who's crafting sequences, and then like I'm not really sure what the SDR's job is if they don't think for themselves and they don't communicate for themselves and they don't learn for themselves. So I know everyone's in a rush to scale, but if we're not training our people to think and to engage with our prospects and customers, are we setting ourselves up for success in the long term? I mean, I guess it depends how smart the leadership is.
Well, and unfortunately, my opinion is, and I've been saying this for a while, and I wasn't very popular, but the VC game and the investment game, which was hurry up and scale, it came at a cost, and the cost was team members and their lack of experience. They're not prepared to go to the next job. They're not prepared to advance to the next thing, because what they've been doing as a job has been taking what somebody else wrote and saying it, or taking what someone else wrote and sending it. And all they were focused on is getting demos for people. And we've got this generation of people. Like, I know, is Bob on here? Aloha Bob, if he's on.
Yes,
Bob
yes, he
Litton.
is. He
Yeah.
is. He is.
He always talks about, he's like, we have this generation of salespeople that don't know how to sell because they've never experienced selling. They experienced this little sliver, and that is it. They didn't experience the full cycle, so they didn't have the opportunity to learn. They didn't have the opportunity to make mistakes and things like you're saying, John. Like, I learn a lot by when I'm talking with people. I'm hearing things. I go, I wonder if I say it this way, if it would land a little bit better. And you test things and you try things, and it's experiential learning, and they just don't have that option.
Yep, I agree with that. I couldn't agree with that more.
I mean, sometimes the biggest barrier is, and John, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You have to have a sales culture that allows for the creativity as well. A lot of times this starts with leadership, empowering and enabling people to go out and try to communicate authentically and uniquely with potential clients in a way that stands out from the droves of automated messages that sound like drones. Furthermore, every activity has a probability around it, right? I mean, you could absolutely send some purely AI written mail to 1,000 people and get a few hits and pat yourself on the back. But the reality is, if you set yourself apart, you say something very unique, thought-provoking, provocative, the chances of getting that meeting go up and up and up. And what I think is really important for us to understand and realize is that it isn't all about trying to sound like everybody else, but we've also got to throw ourselves into the discomfort sometimes. Before I was able to talk to a C-level, it made me very nervous every time. Sometimes I still get nervous talking to a C-level because I want to make sure I sound like I know what the heck I'm talking about. But you've got to throw yourself into the discomfort. Like, I loved your gym analogy. You've got to train some uncomfortable, untested muscle. And what are you gambling ultimately by doing it? If you got an approach that's not working, you're not risking anything by trying an approach that stands apart, that is unique, and might give you a better outcome.
I actually want to go once. Like, everything you're saying is 10,017% true. But I think another challenge is
Not 18%, but 17%.
I know. I decided to get really specific there. Look, I think I have an expression that some people seem to like, which is most sales pros sell stuff they've never used to people whose jobs they've never had in industries they've never worked. And as a result, they don't know how to really relate to their prospects, how to be credible, how to earn their trust. And before they even can get creative, that's the stuff that companies are dropping the ball on. Like, as I'll go up to someone manning a booth at a trade show, and it's usually a young, like I was at SaaStr a couple of years ago, the big software kind of conference for scaling companies, and I'd go up to some trade show booth, and the company has a name I've never heard of that I can barely pronounce, like Schmiza.io or something like that. And I'd go to like the dude in the booth, it could be a girl too, and I would ask them the following question: I've never heard of you. What problem do you solve, and who do you solve it for? And they'd immediately launch into, we're an AI-driven engagement platform and we 10x your scalability. Do you want to see a demo? And I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I don't know what you said just there. You didn't answer my question, more importantly. I just want to know what business or technical problem do you solve, and who is the person who's going to raise their hand and say, I need that? And the guy looked at me like I was from Mars. And I'm like, why are you at the booth? Like, why are you offering me a demo? I could be your competitor. So I think there's like this basic ability to help to get sellers and even marketers to listen and to answer questions in a way that's meaningful for a prospect or a buyer or a competitor. But I think that's really non-existent to some degree. Some companies do an okay job of it, I guess. But to your point, Carson, like all that stuff about creativity and standing out, you can't even do that unless you've mastered the basics.
Love that.
So, John, I want to get into the specifics, and John's going to take us through almost like an example, like he would work on with a client or a customer, using humor and jokes. I wanted to hit a couple comments because there seems to be quite a bit of agreement here. on different things. Just say Lincoln, I think Lincoln's actually in the UK, differentiating your authentic interaction is the best way to combat information age overload. I think that's a
Right there.
stated summary right
Yeah.
there. I also want to hit, Anthony also really liked your gym analogy. I think that's a really good point, right? We don't go trying to bench press 500 pounds day one.
Brandon does, but, you know.
Well, Brandon, yeah, but the rest of us,
the average human,
5 pounds.
It's all that Chick-fil-A.
right? I think what Margaret's saying is the same thing, factory-like production, right? Another way of saying it. And Bob, who is here, is saying, given an easy button like AI, people are going to hit it like lab monkeys hitting the magic button for a treat. And I think we see that a lot. I see it a lot on LinkedIn. We see a lot of those things that are there. And Luke also agrees. And
that would make a great meme. What Bob just said, you know,
the lab monkey saying that for the
or
treat,
untrained salesperson, AI button for a treat.
Exactly.
I bet AI.
You know what?
For me.
You know what I want to point out too. Luke and I had a chat last week or so, and Luke is he's starting his senior year of college next year, so he is in that generation. And I would say Luke has broken out of the mold of everything else. He's doing some great stuff. He's bringing his humanity and everything to LinkedIn. But I think even when someone like Luke is noticing that when he looks to his left and right around, that everything is so robotic, everything is so scripted, everything is just so, you know, brown and vanilla, and just go act like everybody else. It is a big concern. I mean, John, you were saying when I first joined, I was having a conversation earlier with somebody, and we were talking about a very similar thing. And it's like, you know, we have so much tech, and we have so much automation, we have so much scripting, that companies are just forgetting the fact that people need to be trained repeatedly, right? They need a trainer, they need a manager who's going to be involved and help them in the learning process, not just, let me teach you how to use this technology that's going to do everything for you. It's teaching them how to learn, how to make mistakes and how to fix mistakes and how to keep going. And that is just not happening. And it's playing out especially in social right now, which is just becoming a shit show. Can I say that on our show?
No,
it's already done.
It's all right.
Okay.
But I'm glad to hear that you do 1,000 fist bumps in your sleep, Brandon. So
yes, thanks, Anthony. It's a nervous, you know, reaction.
All right. So John, take us through, right? We're a client, we're struggling with our sales messaging, we're struggling getting our message across. Take us through kind of a little bit what you would do, how you would use that humor and that joke. And even I know you picked out an example we were going to go through.
Yeah. Look, when I work with my clients, and I write jokes for them, I'll often talk to them about, well, okay, who's your target persona? What level within the organization are they? Are they a C-level who's thinking about big picture strategic stuff, or are we dealing with, you know, managers and directors who are probably a little bit more focused on tactical stuff? So it's called knowing your audience, right? And what is that person trying to achieve? What does success and failure look like for them? What KPIs are they measured on? Who are their key stakeholders? What affects their emotions? What excites them? Makes them proud? What makes them afraid? What frightens them? Sorry, I said that. What makes them nervous? What makes them anxious? Or just what makes them frustrated and angry? And you know, as vendors, there's problems that we solve that trigger all those negative emotions for them. So if we were to isolate that problem, let's tell a story of what could go wrong if that problem isn't addressed, isn't solved. So, for example, I have a client. They're called EventMobi, and if anyone has ever been to a conference or a trade show of some kind, they make those apps that you open up, and it's got all the content, all the speakers, all the exhibitors, lets you set appointments, all that kind of stuff. And you know, what challenge do these guys solve? They eliminate the hassle of printing programs for an event and disposing of them when it's over. So their team wrote the following joke. They said the most challenging part of printing programs for your event is finding a big enough recycling bin to put them in. getting big laughs, I can tell. But it doesn't matter because the joke isn't written for you guys. It's literally written.
I thought it was clever. That's clever.
I'm good. You know what? To be honest,
I thought it was like one of Brandon's dad jokes about that same level.
Well, like the reality is it paints a picture. Dad joke or not, it paints a picture about what's going to happen if you stick with the status quo.
Right.
And look, I'm not going for Netflix comedy special kind of humor because we're writing short, quick one-liners. You can't write. If you look at traditional stand-up, especially in the modern form, it's a long-winded story with some punchlines along the way. That will not fly. If you're doing cold email, you're sending LinkedIn connection requests, which have 300 characters. If you are at a trade show booth and you have a few seconds to grab an attendee's attention, when they approach your booth, you have a few seconds to kind of shine a light on something and provoke a reaction. So I don't know if that's a dad. Like, I don't even know what a dad joke is. I just know it's like usually got a pun in it. I would like to say that joke was pun free. So I will.
It's those ridiculous jokes that your dad probably told when you were growing up that you groaned at, but that now as a dad you tell and you think you're funny. Trust me, I'm a big sufferer.
I would challenge people, because I know the term dad joke gets thrown around a lot. I would challenge people to watch stand-up and dissect it a little bit. Within every comedian set, there's probably a few things that if you took away their tone and their body language and you saw it on paper, you might think it's a dad joke. I don't. That's the thing, though. I think dad jokes are puns and groaners. If anybody groaned on that, then maybe it's a dad joke. But
by and large, especially the way these guys tell them. But what I love about your thought process, Jon, and your approach is you can almost like lean into the elephant in the room or the problem, right? Because you know that and a lot of times I think salespeople might shy away from some of these types of things because they perceive some risk. They don't know how that message is going to be received. How do you typically help salespeople get over that hump where, they can kind of step into that creative zone? I'd love to hear your thoughts because, I don't have any qualms about it at this stage in my career, but coming out of college when I'm, taking this templatized training and I got to read off a script, the likelihood of me doing creative stuff is next to nothing.
So I'm going to give you guys I want you guys to imagine a real life scenario. Like, look, I have a client that came to me and they said, we stink at exhibiting at trade shows. We don't know how to engage people. We don't know how to explain to them what we do. Can you help? And I wrote them 20 to 30 icebreakers, short, quick bits of humor that highlighted the challenges they solve. They were a small sales team, including the CRO. They were 6 people. And the CRO and one other veteran sales guy took 2 of the jokes and they used them over and over and over to spark conversation after conversation that led to $100K in net new revenue in just 2 months off of the conversations that started with those icebreakers. And they converted another $60K off of cold email. And so let's imagine we're at a trade show. Everyone at the trade show should have, if they're not the person who is affected by a problem we solve, odds are their bosses or maybe a colleague is. But they're going to be familiar with it. Are we in the middle of like a gang fight, guys? What's going on over there?
Tom, what the heck's happening out there?
No, it might be Brandon at the Holiday Inn there. It could be. I don't know.
Tell those employees to pipe down, Brandon.
Yeah.
But imagine we're at a cybersecurity trade show and someone comes to your booth and you say, hey, do you want to hear a joke about, protecting your data on the cloud? What are they going to say? Odds are they're going to say, all right, what do you got?
Sure.
If you deliver the joke and it's written properly, as like I believe they should be, sort of where you're revealing their relevance to them and highlighting the challenge and the setup to the joke, whether or not it gets a laugh, there's going to be a reaction. And if they laugh, it's because it's either a problem today, it's a painful, true challenge that they're struggling with. We laugh at things when they're painful and true. It was a problem in the past that they've resolved, or they know it's going to be a problem in the future because stuff's happening and we're going to be dealing with that soon. That's number one. If they don't laugh, the jokes are structured in such a way where the prospect, who might not be like, they might not find it funny, but they're processing what you said and they might go, That's really interesting that you say it like that, or that you're ready. And then either way, it's a conversation starter. And that's all we're really looking for from this. Like we're not looking to get a 5-star review from all those Netflix fans. We're just looking to provoke conversations in a human, meaningful way and shine a light on some challenges. And through that process, even qualify them to see if they're the best people we should be talking to.
So I need you to give Brandon a joke that he can turn around and tell one of these employees to have them start listening to our show. On your website, I know you talk about how you replicate some of this content to different channels. What I'd love to hear, especially for like my purpose, for our audience, what are some of the other channels that you see this working effectively in? Like, how are you leveraging the humor via, video or other types of ways that you can engage with prospects?
Yeah, that's a good question. So look, there's 7 cold outreach channels that you can open up with a bit of humor, like a short one-liner. So look, my go-to when I'm calling a CRO is this call or this email or this LinkedIn connection request is colder than the relationship between sales and marketing. And I'm highlighting a challenge, that misalignment. And I want to say, like, is this a problem for you? Like that misalignment between your sales and marketing teams? Because that's kind of part of what my workshop is able to do, is bring them together. I'll also sometimes, if I'm calling up a SDR leader, I'll say this call is colder than an SDR's feet their first day dialing. So I'm highlighting the challenge of call reluctance. And so, look, we're shining a light on problems we solve. Now, there's cold calls, there's emails, there's LinkedIn connection requests, there's voicemails, there's videos, there's voice notes on LinkedIn. That cold opener kind of style doesn't really work on a demo, but there's other jokes that you can use to repurpose on a demo in a cold email within our pitch deck. You can turn that into memes, into graphics. I have a client, and I'll tell you guys this joke. I worked at Broadcom, and I worked with their network observability team. They sell solutions to network operations managers who, look, their whole success is predicated upon people not knowing that they even exist. So, because if your network's down, you're going to come running for the network guy or girl. So I wrote this joke for them. Your success in network operations is predicated upon being invisible and people not knowing you exist. That's a career I could have crushed in high school. So Jeremy, who's the product of, he's like the brand evangelist there, or the product evangelist. He took that joke and he added a picture of himself with a mullet from high school. He posted that on LinkedIn, and that was his best performing post to date.
I bet.
Right.
Yeah, because it was different. It was original. I just wrote the joke. He added his own spin where he added his photo, and that it was like 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. So there was some self-deprecation. There was just a clever joke, and it just got people reacting.
And that's an interesting kind of segue too, because I mean, look, you have an important brand and an impressive brand as well, John, in its own right. Like what I've known about you, following you for as long as I have, is you parlay that humor into your posts, and they stand out. I'd love to hear how that has positively impacted your business, your brand, and how you've leveraged LinkedIn as an example with your following.
Well, you've touched on a sore spot. A painful truth is that the algorithm doesn't give me the reach I used to get. I'll post a brilliant joke on there, and I'm like 600.
That's happening to all of us.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly it. So
Yeah.
you've triggered me right here, guys. But all that to say is, look, if I hadn't been using humor to spark conversations, I wouldn't have a business. I wouldn't have a brand on LinkedIn. Like I used to create a lot of videos, but I also wanted my videos to be like joke, and like memorable moment after memorable moment. I was never great at like the whole short form content thing. I used to produce a lot of like intricate videos that people, when the algorithm was a little more giving, would notice me as a result. When I cold call people, which I still do, it's usually someone I'm connected with on LinkedIn, and they know exactly who I am right when I'm calling. Like I been calling up some channel sales leaders recently and saying, hey, this call is colder than the shoulder you get from disengaged channel partners. And they know exactly who I am. So is it the joke on the cold call? Is it the brand on LinkedIn where I'm being a little funny and a little different than all these other people saying 7 quick hacks to 10xing your earnings. I'm trying to just use this. It's sort of a bit of a, what's that term for it? It's a, what do you call it? I forget, the term is on the tip of my tongue. Like, it's a multiplier effect, right?
Yeah, some of the parts. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's it. And it's not going to happen if you're just funny on LinkedIn. It's not going to happen if you're just funny on cold calls or just memorable. Let's get rid of the term funny for a minute. Memorable is the better word. How do you stand out? That's the whole point of being funny. It's not going to happen if you just do it minimally and for a very short period of time. I show up to trade shows. I introduce myself to people. And I was at a trade show the other day where I was kind of doing some prospecting in the manufacturing space. And there was someone I went to, and they're like, I met you at a trade show 2 years ago and use that exact same humor on me to start your spiel. I remember exactly who you are. And so a side of me is like, oh no, I'm using the same jokes. It doesn't matter. They remember who you are.
Yep.
Yep. And that's so much. I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'll ask my question when you're done.
Cool. I mean, Tom, you and I talk a lot about rising above the noise is such an important thing right now. And as you say, like, here's the 7 hacks to this, that. It seems like so many people are just following these, these hacks, these systems that are all boring and everyone sounds the same. One of the things that we've been talking about with rising above the noise and being remembered is bringing more of your humanity into your everything. And I think especially with LinkedIn, it gives you that opportunity for repetition. But the more you bring your human in it, and this isn't like, oh, keep Facebook out of LinkedIn. This isn't all personal. It's bringing your humanity into it. And I think in your case, Jon, your humanity is humor. And you're bringing that into your business conversations to stand out and be memorable. That's what I see.
No, I appreciate that. I don't think people even have, like, look, it's not easy to teach people. Let's back that up. Let's rewind. I don't teach people to be funny. I teach a small percentage of people, quite frankly, to get a little funnier. But all I really care about is that they loosen up through the process. In other words, look, I don't use the joke writing process to make people funny. I use the joke writing process kind of like Mr. Miyagi taught Daniel to be a karate champion by getting him to wax his cars and sand his deck. Remember this? Wax on, wax off, all that kind of stuff. Daniel was like, well, why am I doing this? And he became a champion through the whole thing. And I'm using the joke writing process to help sellers better master what problems do we solve? How are they impacted? Tell some stories about that and just be more human communicators that are also consultative in nature, better subject matter experts, better listeners. And if they can be a little funnier after completing that process, cherry on top of it. Like, that's kind of the whole point of what I do. So it's not always about being funny. It's definitely about standing out. It's about being human. But we're dealing, as we talked about earlier, with a generation of investors who want to ramp these companies quickly. They overhire. Some people aren't really meant to be in sales. No offense to the people who probably aren't watching this anyway. And how can we, and they don't want to invest in enablement. So how can we up their games to be a real salesperson, to craft the right message, to have a real conversation, so to start conversations and to have meaningful ones. And I just use that joke writing process to help my clients achieve those kind of objectives.
You know what I'm hearing you say, I think, Jon, because I think there was a couple of questions earlier about difference, improv versus jokes. But what I really hear you saying is what you're teaching people how to do is, one, break the ice in a way that makes you memorable, but even gets a conversation starter, right? A conversation starter breaks the ice. You're removing that wall of seriousness, right? That often exists in a new relationship, right? There's I have to be serious because I have to be professional. You're kind of removing that and dissolving that. And I think the third piece to it is if I am doing cold outreach, to me, it sounds a little more fun than dialing the phone and saying, hey, do you want a demo or whatever that, an SDR or anybody else at a trade show is going to say. If you take those three things together, you're getting more productive salespeople that are maybe having more fun with their outreach. You're removing some of the seriousness, which builds a relationship and helps you rise above the noise, Brandon, as you're talking about. And then the third piece is there as you are breaking the ice and you're becoming more memorable. It isn't about getting somebody to laugh hysterically on the floor crying. And I think that, that's the first thing you hear of, right, when you think of a joke. Is that a good summary of kind of what you're saying?
It's perfect. And it's like, look, I'll give you guys another analogy from the stand-up world to maybe give this a little context. I'm sure everyone here has gone to watch some stand-up comedy at a club or at a bar, and there's a very good chance you don't know any of the comedians who are on the show. Doesn't mean they're not funny, but they're just not famous. They don't have a Netflix special.
They're not Jerry Seinfeld and all that stuff.
Correct. They're not a brand name that sells tickets. You're at the club to watch comedy, not to watch a comedian. The moment that comedian comes on stage, they have like 15 seconds to make you laugh, to earn your attention, and to earn your trust, so that you give them more of your time, right? Like you listen to the next joke, and that 15-second window, you have to be relevant. You have to say something that's on their minds right away, something that's frustrating them, something that's keeping them up at night, something that they're just petrified about. And how can we trigger that within 15 seconds, whether we're on a stand-up comedy stage or whether, again, they're taking our cold call? You need really 5 to 10 seconds under those circumstances. Our email, like whatever it is, how do we be relevant, memorable, quick? But we can't be relevant and memorable unless we understand the audience inside and out, and why our company is in business, and why they can help them achieve their objectives.
I love that so much. And like, look, I'm somebody who's not funny. So like for me, my challenge to myself would be, how could I do something unique or creative to approach this conversation that is going to be unorthodox, that can get somebody's attention? I loved your Karate Kid reference earlier. I will say, what was it, 40 years ago this week, that with an illegal crane kick, Daniel LaRusso knocked out Johnny Lawrence. But it reminds me, when I ran a call center years ago, we used to do fun little things like I would do a contest. We were calling into a market. We were calling karate dojos. And I said, I'll give $1 to the first person that calls one and says, does fear exist in your dojo? And it was hilarious. And they did it immediately. It was an activity that a lot of people don't enjoy, cold calling, but it gave this fun element of it. So it's like, in talking to sales leaders, Jon, I'd love to get your, any pushback that you ever get from like sales cultures that are super rigid and aren't quite ready for this. Like, I envision there's a lot of people that are so like not able to step outside of that rigid box. But if you make that environment fun for your sellers, for your customers, it creates that personal element right out of the gate. I'm really picky and choosy too on TV shows. I'll watch like the first 10, 15 minutes of that pilot. And if it doesn't grab me, I don't watch it. Because we live in this society where, I got a billion choices to make, and your customers have a billion choices to make too. So I'd love to hear any thoughts about, cultures that are very rigid to accept, this type of approach.
Look, I'm kind of touting something that a lot of people say to me, you write like the kinds of humor you write or you encourage, like we've never heard of this. Like, let's say it's a manufacturing process, some aspect of the manufacturing process. Like you could write a joke that shines a light on that manufacturing process and what sucks about it. People don't think to do that. Yeah. They think humor is meant to be offensive, number one. They think it's meant to be frivolous, number two, like just some frivolous joke that gets attention. They don't realize that you could write a hyper relevant bit of humor that's clean, that's tasteful, and that shines a light on a problem or an impact of not solving it. So they don't always understand what's possible, number one. Number two, to answer your question, Carson, the people that push back the most just on the idea of using humor, not even forget the idea of using comedy writing to better enable sellers and make them better communicators. But the people who push back the most are usually self-involved sales leaders who are so serious themselves that they're ineffective leaders because they don't connect with their customers. They don't connect with their team. They're projecting. They're like, if I've spoken to the odd cybersecurity sales leader, like, we can't be using humor. Our customers are serious. I'm like, no, they're not. take their job seriously,
They're
but
people. They're humans.
they're humans. They watch TV at night. Maybe you're only thinking about how you're going to miss your number all the time and terrified for your reputation. But I promise you that the vast majority of your prospects are competent, take their jobs as seriously as they can, and are okay with the right kind of humor being injected into their prospect communications. And in fact, they're going to say, this job has gotten stale because all these vendors sound the same. This one made me laugh, and they said something that's relevant. I want to talk to them. So I kind of think those sales leaders who push back and feel that humor has no role in their world, I think they're just too inward looking, and maybe they're successful. I don't know. If it's working,
I think one of the terms that we've used in the past is that there's people that hide behind their title. Like they don't let their humanity come out. They don't let their humanity show. In my opinion, is those are the people that they're insecure generally, because if they let their humanity out, they would feel judged, or people wouldn't like them, or they wouldn't like, and they have a clear, differentiation between here's who I am in business, here's who I am in my personal life. The two shall not ever get near each other. And it's just not the way I ever want to do business. Like for me, business and my personality and everything's always kind of gone together. And who I am on LinkedIn. I love it when people tell me, hey, you're exactly like I see on LinkedIn. I'm like, well, thank you. That's the goal, is to bring it. Shy of, I think, like Margaret said on here, those rigid cultures just aren't your prospect pool. Are there any ways that you can approach those types of managers or those types of companies and make any headway? Or is it just pretty much like if they're that rigid, it's just not something that they're going to consider comedy or another route of doing things?
Look, we know this term, which is probably the most 2024 inhuman term I've ever heard, but this concept of multi-threading, where you hit up multiple stakeholders in an account. If I hit up 5 stakeholders in an account and one tells me that, oh, there's no room for humor, there's going to be 4 who are like, I really like this. And most people are, like you said, they're authentic. They don't take themselves that seriously, regardless of how seriously they take their jobs. And it's a matter of finding those people. And then the question is, do you want to wage the battle where the decision maker is really hung up on the way they do things? To me, if a CRO tells me there's no room for humor, this is serious, I'm just like, oh, all right, there's a million other companies out there. I'll go find one where the CRO gets it a little bit more.
And do they all sound like the guy from Taxi when they said that?
Which character?
I can't remember his name now.
Christopher Lloyd.
Jim?
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd's character. I forgot his name on Taxi.
Jim. Reverend Jim.
Jim.
Are there any industries or jokes that you won't touch, John? I have to ask.
Yeah, I'll give you some rules. Like, look, pharmaceuticals, the use case of pharmaceutical sales, it's a natural fit between what I do and the way they sell. They have to visit doctors all the time. They bring them donuts. They all bring them donuts or bring them coffee. They have seconds of their time. And in theory, the right bit of humor can make them really memorable. Look, like I said, you can write a joke to impress any point upon any audience, but we don't want to obviously mock, human tragedy. We don't want to make fun of conditions, illnesses, suffering of any kind. We don't want to punch down on marginalized groups. So when it comes to industries, I don't really think there's too many industries that can't benefit from this. I think it's how we use humor to illuminate a challenge. Like, you don't have to highlight suffering or illness when you're trying to get a doctor's attention. You don't have to do that. It's how do you look? The right joke is connecting tissue between buyer and seller, and you just have to figure out how can we check enough boxes to make that work and to not violate any of the rules. So I don't really know of any industries where it won't work, because again, we're all people. We all appreciate a laugh. Most people, as important as their careers are, they're not defined by it. Most people like a moment of levity in the day. it's just sort of within the topics that we're writing jokes about. What do we want to avoid? And I think that's what we need to tread lightly on.
Well said.
So Bob has a joke here. He says, when someone asks how I am, he says, spectacular. Of course, all that means is I'm making a spectacle of myself. Well done, Bob. I thought that was good. And I wanted to build on what Anthony was saying here. And I wanted to get your take on something, Jon. Anthony's saying, it's really important, and you've touched on this, right, to really make sure you know who your ideal customer profile is. Who is the person you're trying to communicate that joke to along the way? There's so many different, you can't be everything for everybody. Would it be an acceptable thing, right? If I'm again in my business and my sales organization, I spend a few minutes, identify my ideal customer profile, which we should know, and basically the predominant problem that we're trying to solve for them, which we should know. I could go to Chat GPT, Carson, just like you used to do with asking for a dad joke, and put in that information and said, hey, my target customer is this. This is their problem. Can you create a simple joke for me or something that would be an icebreaker along the line? Now, it may not be perfect and you may not like it, but to me, it starts the process of you thinking that way. I mean, Jon, is that something you would recommend somebody to do just to kind of get started, from what we've gone over today?
So because you brought that up, I feel that this entire live stream has been an elaborate setup to the punchline of putting me out of business. But the good news is that
that's what we do here. That's what we do here. That's what we do with our guest. You didn't get that warning before we started?
I did, but I was brave enough to come on.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, though, look, I've played around with AI for jokes. I'm really not impressed by it. And I think that our own sensibility and sense of humor will never come through an AI joke. They're kind of lame, to be quite honest. Like they're not even dad jokes. Like I'd rather hear a dad joke, to be quite honest. And it's trying to mimic the dad joke formula, because jokes are formulas, people. Let's not kid ourselves. But I really think that, again, the real value of writing a joke for salespeople isn't to be hilarious or even to get that conversation going within 5-10 seconds. It's sort of like I have a graphic which I'm happy to share with people if they drop me a line. It's on my LinkedIn content somewhere. I created like an upside down triangle, and as we, the base is actually upside down, and at the top we have like understanding your buyer, understanding what problems you solve, how they impact them, getting creative, learning how to rephrase and say things in simple English, and then sort of then it's creativity, and then it's like, well, how do jokes work? Jokes are formulas. How can we take all that stuff, all those inputs, and have a nice output, which is a short, quick one-liner? And again, even if you don't write a great joke, but you go through that process, you're going to be a better communicator and even storyteller. And we all know that storytelling resonates within sales. The questions I put my clients through, to get them answering before we even start the creative process, it's kind of before and after storytelling. So you can use ChatGPT to get you an output, which probably isn't that great. And if you were to deliver it, your prospect might be like, what? But I still think the value lies in creating the joke yourself, no matter what.
Interesting. Okay. Brandon, Carson, any final questions here before we need to wrap up here? I know, Brandon, you need to get to a meeting.
I was just going to ask any other, projects or jokes or just successes that you're particularly proud of that really stand out, Jon, like where you were able to come in and really, have an impact on the way that they did business. I'd love to just hear how impactful injecting that humor was into someone's sales process.
Yeah. So I mentioned the client, they're called PowerCord, and they succeeded with trade shows and cold email. I have another client, they're called TrustArc, and I spoke with the CRO a few months after. I worked with his new logos team. They were like 15 or 16 people, I forget. And 6 of them were brand new hires. I was inviting them to the workshop with their Gmail addresses. And I spoke to him about 3 months later, and we hadn't had time to review the success of the workshop. We did an open mic at their QBR where I gave my keynote, the team told their jokes that they wrote in the workshop, and then I told my jokes, and there were laughs. We all got laughs. on jokes about global privacy compliance efforts, the most boring topic on the planet. But we wrote these jokes that painted these pictures that told these stories. And I got a couple of emails during the quarter that followed that keynote. Hey, we closed some deals with off a cold email that had those jokes. And I'm like, great. And so I met with the CRO who hired me a few months later, like 3 months after we did the workshop. And I said, so what'd you think of all this? And he leans in, and he's kind of like, is a bit of a gruff guy. And he goes like, look, I don't want to tell you how to run your business, but, and I thought he was going to like tear me apart, but he's like, the real value of what you do. And I know I've articulated this during this live stream. The real value of what you do wasn't that we closed some revenue off a cold email. He's like, you got my new reps being able to express what problems we solve for who in simple English before they even started on the job. They ramped quickly, and the team hit numbers in the quarter. 2 of the 6 reps exceeded quota, and the other 4 were close. And he's like, I've never seen that before.
Amazing.
So the process was really impactful for ramping, for onboarding, and for even everboarding his existing reps.
And so what I like about that is
medicine. So laughter is truly the best medicine for a struggling sales team.
That's right.
I mean, usually medicine's the best medicine, but I guess in sales that there's no actual illness. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're onto something. But again, I keep saying it, but it's not even about the laughter. It's about comedians like, and I'll use this another real life stand-up comedy experience. When I get on, like my favorite thing to do when I was doing comedy on a regular basis was I'd like to watch the opening 10 minutes of a show, because I'd sort of look, improvisers are making up as they go along. They're never going to repeat it again. Stand-ups are honing, and we're crafting, honing, iterating, refining bits and messaging to get reactions night after night, to flick on switch after switch. And I might write a joke about, I don't know, online dating apps or social media or GIFs or using pop culture references from that 25-year-olds would get. And I'm much older than that. But if I go into the room and I notice that it's all people kind of like mid-40s and older, maybe those jokes aren't going to fly. And so my favorite thing to do is to understand my audience going in and being able to recognize, is this going to be received? And guys, I realize I've gone off on a tangent and don't fully remember the exact question that I was asked. So I apologize. So I rambled a little bit there. So I apologize for that.
That's okay. That was good. I think, you were telling the story about your CRO saying that the biggest benefit was that you got them to think. And I just see that as we talked earlier, and I've had more and more conversations around this, is that we're not helping people think. We're giving them scripts and telling them to go and smack them on the back and say, go be successful. Anything we can do to get them to understand who they're talking to better, to slow down enough to try and, however you want to say it, put yourself in their shoes, understand their world a little bit better, and just have more of a conversation. I think it's just so refreshing for people on the other side to just have a chat. I mean, I had a conversation. This was a couple months ago. I got somebody on, and we're on a Teams call, and I asked about something in their background, and they lit up and they started telling me all this background and information and about their history with their son and daughter around this thing and and I just kept asking them questions. I was totally intrigued. And we're like 22 minutes into a 30-minute meeting, and we never talked about anything other than that. And they're like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. You were going to do it. I'm like, don't even worry about it. Like, this was an awesome conversation. And of course, we rebooked for later. It was a much better conversation. If I had been focused on, I got to get my demo done, I would have lost all opportunity to connect with that person, to enjoy the process, let them enjoy the process. That person ended up not buying from me, but I've gotten 2 referrals from them.
Yep.
Just because I let the humanity win and just let follow the humanity conversation where it was going.
Was that the large pencil?
No, Seth is a client already. Yeah.
Okay.
But no, that wasn't it. Yeah.
Well, we have
Brandon. So yeah,
we have a new comedy team forming here. Johnson and Carlson looks like they're going to get
Do that.
together and be a comedy team here. So
I love it.
we'll look out for that. We'll look out for that.
That's
John,
good.
you've definitely been inspiring. That's the first time that's happened on our show where we had comedy teams being created there. So, John, if someone wants to learn more about what you do, your business, where can they find you?
Obviously, LinkedIn is the best spot to find me, but also jonselig.com, JONSELIG.com is my website. And I would say those are the two best spots to get a hold of me.
Okay. And come with a joke.
Depends. A good
At
one.
least try.
People reach out to you with jokes, and does that happen often?
The odd time, and there's been a couple that have definitely made me laugh. There's been a couple that made me go, "You don't understand how this works."
But they're good prospects for you. They're self-qualifying for you. That's perfect.
They're usually sales reps with no budget, so it's debatable.
See, and that's why I always use dad jokes. I could use someone else's humor to add humor into a conversation without having to trust that I could create something funny.
I got to add something though. But when a team of reps works together and they write 30, 40 kind of jokes that I teach them to write, and one or two of them is brilliant, it's for everybody to use across all their outreach and communication. So we can't depend on everyone to create their own. It's how do we leverage one that's going to resonate with our audience?
Good point. Very good point.
No, I really do agree with you, John, is the process is the value here, right? The process that they go through is the real value. It's not the joke itself. It's the process that's going to be really, really impacting. Well, thank you. This has been awesome. Carson Brandon, I think what John went over today, and I think even last week on the show, this kind of puts a bow on a lot of the things that we talk about, right? Of modern selling, building relationship. These are real tactics for doing it, which are really, really, I think, amazing.
Well, I think we need to do an episode soon too on talking about themes and consistency. We've gotten a little bit away from that, but everything that Carl was talking about, what John's talking about, really helping people more practically get into like, hey, here's your 3 themes that you talk about. Within each theme, you've got some sub themes, but this helps you create that consistency. I know, like Carson, you do that naturally. And then for me, it's always 3 themes in your humanity, because you got to bring your personality and your humanity to it. And I feel like so much of that, I see more people are using LinkedIn. The amount of people that publish is increasing, not dramatically, but it's increasing, probably because of AI, which means we just have more crap to weed through. But as more people are starting to try and use it, getting that refined, and you said you're putting the bows on, being human, like Carl was all about, man, we got to know ourselves or else none of this stuff matters. And John, you're talking about knowing yourself enough to show up in a way that somebody's going to capture their attention and they're going to let their guard down a little bit. And I think, us doing one again on what are the things that you do talk about, because random acts of publishing just don't add up to a whole lot of success.
Well said. All right. Well, thanks again, John. Brandon, Carson, as always, thank you. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
But John and I were going to have a good time if you didn't show up. So we were ready. We were prepared.
Never count us out.
That's right.
We got here eventually.
All right.
And Margaret and Anthony and Becky and Luke and Bob, of course. Aloha to Bob, everyone else in there. Thank you so much. That was a really, really active day today in the comments. And
some great ones.
That was awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Wrap us up.
All righty. Well, thank you, John, and to our audience. Until next time, happy modern.